So I'm very, very glad to, hello John, I'm very, very glad to introduce John Mcdonnell. He's Labour MP for Hayes and Harlington, and he opened the national launch for People Before Profit emergency programme exactly 3 weeks ago today. And he's also been involved with the People Before Profit from its early days. And so I'm very, very glad that you've been able to make it. You're very welcome.
Thanks, Hilary. I'm really grateful. Sorry I was late. I've been at on a Zoom and for the South London, for the UCU and their campaign now on further education. Can I just say, Layla, you have my 100% support and solidarity. And I'm so proud of what you're all doing in the campaign, because it's, I don't know, it's people like you that are inspiring others to stand up and fight back now, and that's what we need. I'll be brief. We launched this a few weeks ago, as Hilary has said, and it's because we wanted to try and bring together just a basic set of demands that address the issues that people are facing. And to be honest, it's got worse. I don't know whether you saw the figures over the weekend. There was a new report published, and they were talking about, with the withdrawal of furlough and the other support that was put into the economy, maybe now within weeks, over 1 million young people facing unemployment. And that's young people being laid off, but it's also young people entering the job market and having no chance of getting a job. Now, I'm old enough to remember the 80s. I went through them. And I remember this, a whole generation was scarred right the way across the country in terms of unemployment. And it was tough. And some people never recovered. And I tell you this, and this is no exaggeration. If you look at the suicide rates amongst young men in particular during the 80s, they steadily rose to alarming levels. And that's what unemployment does. But also it's linked to poverty as well. And I have nothing but anger about the withdrawal of the furlough scheme, because it was a scheme, the furlough scheme was put forward by me as Shadow Chancellor when the pandemic, well, when we first heard of the pandemic. It was much more generous than the one that was brought forward by Sunak, but at least we got something. But we also said the furlough scheme should last for as long as the pandemic lasts. So why introduce it if you're going to withdraw it at such an early stage? And no one could predict how long the pandemic would go on and what its effect was. So to withdraw at this stage actually will effectively cut people's wages, and with no protection for people on the minimum wage either, because it means now that large numbers of people on the minimum wage, if they get any support at all, it will be below the minimum wage. And also, I want to just say this too. In the next couple of weeks, we're expecting the Low Pay Commission to undertake its annual report on what the level of the minimum wage should be. It was consulting on a 49p increase. Now, it's not a real living wage, but at least a 49p increase will give something. There's rumours that Sunak is either going to cut the increase or freeze the minimum wage. There's a petition we launched a couple of weeks ago. It's got 40,000 signatures already. And it's absolute, we've got to really fight this now, because it will force people into absolute penury. Can I say also, at the beginning of the pandemic, we were concerned, and we were reporting union by union, that if people weren't getting the right financial support, they would be forced back into work at the risk to their health. And that's what happened. Tragically, we lost lives as a result of that, and large numbers of people suffered. And also it actually extended the pandemic itself, because obviously people were being dragged into work, often on public transport, and as a result of that, we're infecting others. And what I'm worried about now is we're going to go in the same situation. Where regions and areas are pushed into the third tier without adequate support, and people are then going to be forced into finding whatever work they can and putting themselves at risk, particularly people who already have vulnerabilities in their health. That's what's so scandalous about what's happened today with regard to Manchester, but it's rolling out now to Yorkshire and the next wave of that. My view is straightforward, and I've been saying it for weeks. I actually do think we do need a circuit breaker lockdown, but actually You can only, lockdowns like that are only successful if there's proper financial support, and that does mean extension of the furlough scheme, definitely. Can I just say on the programme we put forward, it is about making sure that there is proper welfare support for all those who can't work. My view now is that any government worth its salt will be given a jobs guarantee. That's the first thing. But I also believe now that we should have a minimum income guarantee, but set at the level of the real living wage. So anyone in work or out of work actually has a real living wage. And on that basis, we can have a social security system that actually does provide security, because it certainly doesn't at the moment. We know that we know that we've got to go through this pandemic, but the way in which we can get through it now is to recognize that this is a crisis that is horrendous. Individual personal tragedies, lots of hardship, human suffering, largely as a result of poor government policy. I have to say, mismanagement from the beginning by Boris Johnson. The concept of herd immunity, lack of financial support, gaps in the support that was given, all of that. But we're facing another crisis, and that crisis is an existential one, and it's climate change. So what we should be doing now is, if we are going to rebuild our economy, I think it is making sure that as we do that and we come through the pandemic, we do it on the basis of tackling the next crisis that we face, which is climate change. And that does mean, as we've put in the programme, green investment, a Green New Deal, the jobs in terms of installation of homes and public buildings and elsewhere, but also in terms of alternative energy sources, water, wave, solar power, all of those. And also in terms of our transport system as well, how we move towards non-fossil fuels that enable us to maintain transport system and our industries as well. That's the program we've put forward. I think it's a program that covers a whole range of issues, but I think it's highly relevant to the issues that we're facing, the challenges that we're facing now. One final point, and Layla made it, and Hillary made reference to it as well. There are some who won't let this crisis go to waste. There's large numbers of employers who, well, happened in my constituency, it's happened across the country, where they've been given support from the government, financial support unconditionally. Some of them are using that financial support to actually implement strategies that they've wanted to implement for years, which is fire and rehire, sacking people and then cutting wages and undermining conditions. Others are using it to bully and try and undermine the trade union representation within their companies with the threat of unemployment. What we've got to do is act in solidarity with all those, like Layla and her colleagues, who are standing up and fighting back, and that's what we do. But I do it, with the same anger, actually, because there are some who've made a fortune out of this crisis, lucrative contracts handed to the friends of the Tories, and they're making a mint. I actually think that apart from the criminal negligence by Johnson in his handling of this pandemic, I actually think it's appalling, grotesque corruption that we're witnessing at the moment on the award of these contracts. So we stand up, and that's why the program we've launched, the whole concept of people for profit that we've been campaigning on for so long, I think is more critically relevant now than ever. And it's a matter of now standing together in solidarity on behalf of each other, on behalf of our whole communities as well. Solidarity.